I encourage it to everyone. And so, it's only 2 days, so you don't really learn enough to you just learn the beginning skills to make things with using, that integrate with Bitcoin or do anything interesting. So sort of the next thing I started to do was, and the reason I'm telling you this is all like the basis of a class I teach now. So the next thing I try to do is like, okay, how do you kind of start connecting into the network and do this like kind of raw socket programming? So you just connect to a network on another peer on the Bitcoin network that you can find using their IP address like on the internet on a site like BitNodes. If you've ever looked there, you can just find their host and their port number, and you can plug it into a little script like this. And if you run this script, it'll fail because you have to learn how to actually talk to the peer. And so here's a little thing: if you send exactly bytes like these, somehow magically they'll respond to you. And so I'm not going to demo this right here. Actually, let me do one other thing. So I got to do one other thing for the demo. Okay, there we go. Forgot to do that. Sorry about that. Cool. All right, continue on. So in this little, I just started learning this stuff for myself, and I taught a little class with some friends I met at a Bitcoin conference. And so there was like 4 of us. You can see, for example, this is the first class. There's like 3 people up in the corner, and I just started like teaching the things I had learned. And by the end of it, we did some interesting projects. This is like a crawler of the network. So you can go and connect to one node and basically go and, so like here's a crawler, right? It has a bunch of these workers. Workers are just basically threads. They just inherit from thread. If you know a thread, it's like every process that runs on your computer can spawn off multiple like sub-processes. So like for a video game, maybe one of them will manage some networking, another one will manage redrawing the screen. They'll have different responsibilities. And so here you just spawn up a bunch of these workers, and they go and talk to a bunch of nodes and try to figure out who they were connected to. And then slowly you could figure out the entire topology of the Bitcoin network. And we were able to write this after like 5 hours of the class. And so it was really cool. Like I was learning this as I went, and this is just up on my GitHub. You can see how it works. You save it all to SQLite, which is really neat. And yeah, so that was kind of an interesting thing. And we did it after a couple more kind of iterations of this class. We got to this point where we could go and take the the first block that actually had anything interesting in it. Maybe that's just a transaction. It was when Satoshi sent Hal Finney the first Bitcoin transaction. It was like block 170. And so we got far enough in this little class where we could go and connect to a peer, start downloading blocks, and kind of validating the Coinbase transactions until we got to block 170, where there were 2 transactions, a Coinbase and like a real one. And so here we made some code that could actually go in and here it could go in and read the script, the locking script that was sent, right? A Coinbase transaction that Satoshi had mined somewhere in the first 100 blocks, right? Because there's a 100 block timeout when you mine. It takes a while for you to spend it. And so it's like a simple Python code where we can actually go and validate this transaction, and verify the signature. I'm not going to go into exactly how this works, but I think it should strike you as kind of interesting. It's a small amount of code to do this, and you can kind of understand like what's going on. And it's a really neat experience to do network programming like this, because at least in the world I came from, like fintech startups, it took like 6 months of business development in order to get an API key to do anything cool, right? And in Bitcoin, all you got to do is figure out how to send this really simple first message, which we eventually will, we learn how to do that by hand and to know what exactly every kind of field, where is it? How to speak mainnet. You need this little magic field to prefix your messages. If you want testnet, this is the old testnet. Testnet 3 is the new one. So like we learn all these like really nitty-gritty details, and so here's a class. It's up on my YouTube channel. Just go to I have a website, justinmoon.com, and so here's like 15 hours of like raw network programming if you want to learn how to do this. It's all free, and like if you DM me on Twitter or something, I will help you through it. And so it's really cool. It's like raw, low-level skills that are really useful, and they give you a little bit better insight into how Bitcoin works. So yeah, I mean, this is all on my website. That's probably the easiest way to look it up. And so after I did that, I was like, cool, we learned something else. There was another project I found really interesting. It's called TinyChain. It was made by James O'Byrne. He's one of the people that organized the Lightning Residency. And so it's a really cool project. It's a 1,000-line Python program that's like a mini version of Bitcoin. You know, it's not so bad compared to like Bitcoin Core. And it has all the important things, like here's proof of work. It has peer-to-peer networking. Here's like validation of transactions and blocks. And so it's like this really cool thing, and so it's more accessible than Bitcoin Core if you want to learn the basic mechanics of what's going on. But it's still 1,000 lines, and it's kind of confusing. And so I started to try to make like a, I started to teach a, actually, 1 second, this is wrong. So this is all last minute, so they just squeezed me on, so I'm not terribly organized, but. So I made this little demo. So this is like another thing we do in my class. It's like, how do you like iteratively build this up from like a tiny little Python program, right? So that's another thing we do in my little class. We make this thing called PNG coin. It's like the dumbest version of a digital cash you could possibly imagine. So the way PNG coins works is they're like a list of these of actual PNG images, and every one of them is like it's like. This is an example of how they're minted. So I issue 10 PNG coin to Alice. This is like the Coinbase transaction for PNG coin. It's like the dumbest thing ever, right? You can go to a meme generator and generate this and counterfeit the transactions. It's very easy to, and it's very easy to forge transfers. Double spends are trivial. Every time you make a transaction, it's like 1 megabyte. It adds 1 megabyte to the size of the file that is the money. So it has every problem imaginable, and it's a cool learning project. So just for an example, like this is how validation works for PNG coin. So I gotta execute these cells. So this is how you'd validate a coin. It would give you a first one. It's like, is this a valid minting coin? Yeah, that's Donald Trump's face. That's his signature. He's giving it to Alice. So like in the little input, you say yes. It gives you another one. I, Alice, that transfer 10 coins to Bob. Signed Alice, right? The first, you know. So it's kind of like Bitcoin. It's like are they transferring the right stuff to the right person? And so it's kind of like the stupidest version of. And so you'd say yes. So that's a valid coin. Here's one that is invalid. It's like the signature is wrong. And so the obvious way to improve that is to like do digital signatures, right? And so over like 6 or 7 like lessons, we do that. And at the end, we have this like POW coin. This is where we're at right now. It's kind of like TinyChain, and I'll just give you a demo. It's kind of cool. Like so you can run it in sorry. So you can run it in Docker, and you can actually like, it's like a little mini Bitcoin network that you wrote yourself, and you know exactly how every part of it works. And so this will spin up 3 different nodes that are all like mining nodes. So they have one little thread that's mining, another little thread that is doing the peer-to-peer networking. And so it takes a second to spin up, and then over here in another terminal, you can say like Python, powcoin.py, tx alice bob 1. This will send 1 coin from Alice to Bob. And so you can see here, oh, that's probably bad. So 1 node started, so the mempools might be out of sync. This one found a block immediately before these other 2 started. Okay, so this is, okay. As you can see, it's still like a learning project, but all right, it's a bad demo. We'll try it one more time. Can you see it all right? Yeah, sorry, the resolution on the screen was not quite right, but So it'll start up 3 little nodes, and we should be able to talk to it from like outside the world, submit a transaction to the network, watch it get added to the mempool, and then watch the kind of next block get mined. So hopefully this one works. Okay, it happened again. So there's something wrong, but like it's a neat little thing. It was working. I don't know what happened, but what you can do is you can just submit transactions to it and watch watch it be added to the mempool, watch it get mined, watch the transaction that was mined leave the mempool, and you can even like submit a long chain that would reorganize the blockchain. So it has like chain reorganizations, right? If like a really good chain showed up that is not based on the tip, you can go through that, which is like one of the really important things with Bitcoin, right? Like that consensus bug we had a while ago. If that had been exploited, you need to reorganize the chain back to a valid tip. And so here's some look at that, some videos I made. And so the last thing this project, I'm sort of telling you these because I think these are good projects to do if you're learning Bitcoin development. That's why I want to share these. So I did a hackathon and we made a Lightning hardware wallet, the first one anybody ever made. And it's just like a $10 Arduino, and here's our little UI. And so that was a really cool project, and afterwards I worked on this simple hardware wallet, which I encourage anyone who wants to learn a little bit about Arduino and how like HD wallets work, and how transaction signing works. It's a really neat project. It's like 300 lines of code and you can write a hardware wallet. And so I really recommend this as a really fun learning project. Stepan is the kind of main maintainer. He's very sophisticated and will answer questions. And so that was a really cool project. And then I went around and looked at some like the way real hardware wallets worked. And one thing was really surprising. Like this is Trezor's firmware. It's like all Python. That was surprising as hell, right? I assumed it'd be C or C++ or something. And so digging a little down, here's Trezor Crypto. So they managed to make the like firmware, the business logic in Python, and all of the crypto code, right, for like hashing stuff and doing transaction signatures is in C, and they managed to like call that from Python. And so if you want to like make a little Trezor yourself, like for example, if you have one of these, this is like an M5 stack it's called. It's this neat little board that you can program in Python that has a screen and 3 buttons. So you can make like your own hardware wallet for 40 bucks using Trezor's cryptocurrency or cryptography code that's heavily optimized for like a small underpowered device. And you can actually do that yourself, which is pretty amazing. So like those are 3 projects that I do in my little class. It's just called Biddle Bootcamp. So like this is the one where you build your own little mini Bitcoin implementation. This is the one where you do the peer-to-peer networking. Here's you build a hardware wallet. And so yeah, this little class I did, and the reason I did the class is like I wanted to get up to speed 6 months ago. All I found was Jimmy's class, and there just weren't enough good resources. So I just took the projects that helped me and made a little class that I teach to share what I learned. And so there's some really cool, like when I launched it, it was really cool. Like I just tweeted it, expected like 10, 20 people to show up. I ended up getting 350 people apply, and I let 250 in. Basically anybody who seemed to try with the application, like a lot of fake email addresses and stuff, but 250 weren't. And so like as an example of some of the really interesting like stories of people that came, like here's a guy, we had a little channel in Slack where people introduce themselves, and this guy says, hey guys, I'm so-and-so from Venezuela, web application developer. Met Bitcoin in 26 when I had to immigrate to Argentina because I couldn't get medication for my daughter, right, as Venezuela went to hell. Been working with Python and data analysis, really motivated to learn about Bitcoin. And so there's a lot of these people from like 4 countries that were able to sign up for this class, and they're super motivated to learn, mostly because it was free. And so it was a really interesting, I want to share it because it was an interesting glimpse into the power of this like wide open system that's accessible to anybody, whether you live in New York City or Venezuela, or I guess this guy's in Argentina now. But I thought it was really cool how the people that seemed most interested to learn this stuff were in places like Venezuela, places like Argentina, where I got the most interest in the class. So I thought that was really interesting and wanted to share it with you guys. And that's it for my talk. I just wanted to tell you guys about it. If you want